Hey everybody, welcome back. It is the Rasball Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am Beadon, joined by the Fantasy Master Lothario, the mustachioed man of mystery, Gray Albright. How you doing, Gray?
I'm good, man. How are you doing, B Don? That's a better question. Are you doing better than Tim Anderson?
Yeah, I think so actually. I mean, in general, yeah, I think so. I think his bank account is probably still in a whole lot better place than mine is. But outside of that, yeah, I'm doing all right, Gray.
Tim
Are you
Anderson, actually, Tim Anderson's weekend is a good example of how sometimes money doesn't matter. So that was a brutal weekend for him, man. I made the mistake of tweeting I felt bad for Tim Anderson, and people were like, "Ah, why you feel bad for him?" But man, I don't know, man. It's like I I can't even imagine, bro. Like he went out. He looked like such a sucker. Oh man, dude. I mean, yeah. Damn. He got like it looked like I mean I wouldn't mess with Jose Ramirez, okay? First of all, would not mess with Jose Ramirez myself, because I know better, especially now. And after hearing the story about how, like, when he was a kid, people with guns used to chase him down if he didn't get a hit in a game. Like he's been through it. You know what I'm saying? So he's not a guy you mess around with. I wouldn't think. So, but he barely. It looked like he barely touched him. Like honestly, like who was the Odor and Batista? Odor really like landed a punch on Batista. Like that was like he hit him. But Jose Ramirez, honestly, like if we're being real, he put his head down and he was just swinging wildly and he looked like he grazed Tim Anderson. Tim Anderson must have a glass jaw because he was done. It was like done. It was like, okay, goodbye, man. If you thought a guy with one homer power had a bit more in the tank as far as power was going, no, man. Tim Anderson looked bad. Oh, he looks so bad. I do feel bad for him though, man. Man. And for anyone who's ever been embarrassed ever in their life, I would think you'd have some empathy, even though he absolutely did fuck around and find out. Woo! In like the worst way. Ah.
Now I got to upgrade the explicit warning on the podcast for this week, Gray. Thanks a lot.
Oh,
No, um,
you beat me. Throw in a beep.
yeah, just go in and edit the podcast and add beeps. That's nothing, Brandon. I don't do anything at all except show up and talk. But yeah, you do all that. Thanks, Gray. Thanks. Just yeah, no big deal. I have professional editing equipment over here. I'm like a CBS over here. I got like mics and editing equipment, all that stuff over here. Thanks, Gray. Yeah. Are you funding this? No, I mean he got like it was a full right hook, but like he got like the weird knuckles, like he got like the secondary knuckles, not even like the punch knuckles, and still got knocked out. I mean, I know everybody in Major League Baseball is a good athlete. They're all strong. Like anybody takes a right hook from most professional baseball players, they're probably getting knocked out. That was bad, and I have a gripe with baseball fights in general. Like even the Odor Batista one, which is like I think the gold standard for recent ish fights. Like there's too much pulling away. Like the ref stepped or the up stepped away. He was gonna let them square up, and then all of a sudden everybody's pulling each other off. Like I don't even know if Tim Anderson would have gotten clocked if his teammates hadn't have pulled Ramirez to the point where like the right hook was exactly the right distance. I just want to see him square off.
That's actually a fair point. Yeah, but then you look at the fact that Elvis Andrus is basically another 3-homer guy. He was the one pulling back Tim Anderson. It was like a it was like a feather pulling back a marshmallow. Like, and then Andrew Vaughn, who I'm sure is a strong enough guy, like, compared to me, but he carried Tim Anderson like he was a baby. It was basically like, okay. But I hear what you're saying, though. That is a fair point, because, like, if Tim Anderson and Jose Ramirez were just squaring up and there was no one like pulling at them, yeah, maybe it would have looked different. all I know is Tim Anderson might also be lucky that Jose Ramirez just grazed him.
I mean, getting knocked out's getting knocked out. At least if he would have got like really hit, he wouldn't have this embarrassing like image out there of himself. Now it's like, oh, like you can just get like flicked in the head and you're just gonna knock over.
I do think it's actually from a big picture sort of perspective. Speaking of big picture, Tim Anderson's like, he just tweeted, "Think of the bigger picture," which I don't even know what that means. But maybe he's talking to me. He's basically right now. Tim Anderson is like punch drunk, and he's just tweeting stuff. But he just tweeted big picture. So because Tim Anderson tweeted that, I'll try and figure out what he means by saying, like, if you think about the big picture, the fact that it looked like he barely tagged Jose Ramirez. Like, Jose Ramirez, I feel like what we don't realize is I think a lot of people may not like Tim Anderson in the league, because it was basically like he barely touched Jose Ramirez, and Jose Ramirez is like, okay, we're fighting. That's it. We're going. Because, yeah, I mean, it didn't take a lot to set off Jose Ramirez. So I think the entire league has had enough of Tim Anderson in some ways. And even like his teammates, I mean, yeah, some of them were, pulling him back, but most of them were like, yeah, you go get your ass beat. Good luck.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess in regards to big picture, I got two ideas on that one, Gray. One, big picture. Now Tim Anderson is set up when he gets DFA'd after this year because he can't hit anymore. He has a future matchup lined up with Jake Paul that's gonna make some money for him down the line. And then also, I mean, if we think big picture, like at least he got to live in Chicago for his career, whereas Jose Ramirez has been in Cleveland. Like that's a W. That big picture, that's a W.
Yeah. Also, if you're thinking about like if Tim Anderson isn't just hated in general, and everyone in the league wasn't secretly rooting for Jose Ramirez, which it may not be the case. People may legitimately not like Jose Ramirez either, and they may think that he jumped the gun on Tim Anderson a little bit. But so if that's the case, then, thinking big picture, there is no one ever going to try and make a tag on Jose Ramirez again. There's no one. He will literally, he'll steal 150 bags like next year. People are gonna be like, well, I ain't messing with that guy. Don't throw it. Don't even bother throwing it the second, because I'm not tagging him.
Just eat it. Just eat it. It's fine. We're giving him second.
Eat it. I am not going near that.
All right, Gray. Let's go ahead and move on to some other baseball stuff that might be relevant for our listeners. We said it last week. There's going to be a number of trades we're not going to cover because, well, we record on Monday typically, and trade deadline was Tuesday, and there were a number of trades we didn't cover. So let's just talk about them real quick, Gray. I don't know how long we need to spend on them since everybody's already in their place and everything. If anything, some of the more interesting stuff may be all the people who get DFA'd after the All-Star break, the trade deadline, but they haven't really cleared and signed with anybody. So we'll get to that when that comes next week. Let's start at the top. Let's start with the biggest one, Justin Verlander goes back to Houston. The Mets get Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford. I mean, Verlander himself he's been fine this year, but it's kind of in the Scherzer mold where it's starting to decline a little bit, and you see it most with the K rate for Verlander specifically.
Yeah, no, I think we've seen Justin Verlander's his better days are behind him for sure. On the Astros, he'll probably get more wins, and what people think of the trade. I think the common perception of the trade is probably accurate. I'm not going to I'm not going to be able to break any news here with Justin Verlander on the Astros. He'll be fine. His Ks are way down. His walks are up a little bit. I think I think probably the Crawford boxes in Houston could hurt him a little bit more. Like he could end up giving up more homers in Houston, and that could hurt him because, his stuff just isn't as there as it has been, for the last, 15 years or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's fine, though. I think we're probably seeing Justin Verlander fantasy starter number 2 versus a fantasy starter number 1, like I was saying with Max Scherzer last week. But in that regard, he's been pretty solid for ratios, and he's 40 years old. I mean, how much more can you ask for a guy? I mean, he's so clearly a first ballot Hall of Famer. Do we ever see a 300 win guy again? I don't think so, right? I don't know. Anyway, I think Verlander is what he is at this point, which is like a solid number 2. And he's probably, he's a guy. He probably has a bit more wins probability now because of the Astros versus the Mets. So yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be really hard to get the 300 wins, as you kind of commented in there. Just the shorter outings, the 6-mans, all the stuff that is being done to take innings and stress off of pitchers' arms nowadays. Yeah, I don't know if we ever get to 300. It seems like Scherzer and Verlander might have been our best shots at that. I mean, I guess, do you really think Verlander's at SB2 for our game, given the lack of strikeouts? I mean, he certainly, he missed a little bit of time this year, so the player rater numbers may not quite match up, but I mean, he's currently 52nd on the player rater among pitchers.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that says he's like an SB4,
right.
SB5 even. Now, the certainty and the that you have with him, the innings, the ratios, maybe that bumps him up just given some of the blow-ups that we've seen from some of the other guys. But like, if you're looking at
okay, so sorry not to interrupt, but if you gave him Charlie Morton's wins, which Braves, Astros, that feels pretty similar. If you gave him Charlie Morton's wins, he'd have 6 more points on the player rater, and that takes him to about 25 overall for starters. So it's just because he had no wins, why he's that low.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's true. I mean, it's not like he was with a bad team, and the Astros aren't the Braves in regards to scoring.
I would say actually the Mets were a bad team. the Mets are a bad team.
That's okay.
I wouldn't say they were. They are. I just want to clarify. He has 6 wins on the year. I mean, he's not exactly. I mean, I wouldn't say he should have 20 wins already, but 6 wins is pretty bad for a guy with a barely 3 ERA.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Certainly, the contribution he's got on the wins side. I mean, wins are always fickle. That's just how it is.
I know, but wins are fickle, but also that's why he's down at 52 on the player rater. I mean, he has a negative for wins where, like, Charlie Morton has 10 wins and he has $6 in value for wins, and Justin Verlander has less than 0. So I mean,
he also has negative strikeouts.
So if he was on the Astros all year, I think he would have 10 wins. And if he had 10 wins, he'd be a top 25 starter. I'm not saying he's a top 15 starter anymore, but a 2 to 3, I don't know. I mean, not 4 to 5, like whatever you were saying. Okay, but you can say that though, because you know what? On this podcast, we allow contrary opinions.
I mean, well, I guess would you take him rest of season over Charlie Morton, whose K rate is better?
Yeah,
The numbers
I
are
would
very
take him over
similar.
Charlie Morton. Yes, I would take him over Charlie Morton. I'd actually, here's a guy. So him or Aaron Nola. Now Nola right now is 28th out of starters, 28th starter on the player rater. Would you take Nola or Verlander?
I'm taking Noah.
Yeah, Nola sucks. No, Nola's fine. Okay. Nola's good for a lot of things, but man, he gives up a lot of home runs. I mean, he's really a pain in the ass. I mean, if you're cursing once on a podcast, you may as well just curse the whole time, right? Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm taking Nola, but I think that's pretty close actually. I don't know. I mean, yeah, Dan Dunning is 31 out of starters. Dan Dunning or Justin Verlander?
I feel like Dunning's been exactly what Verlander has been.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe I take Verlander just because there's no way he's not finishing out all the innings through the season, whereas I suppose Dunning is a little bit younger and hasn't really gone he hasn't ever put up like a 200 inning type of season. So maybe there's an innings thing there with Dunning, but I mean, I think they're I wouldn't expect that what they give you is all that different. Good ratios, neither is strikeout based.
Yeah.
I mean, the Rangers Park's a
Scherzer.
little bit better.
So I would say Scherzer is definitely still better than
Yeah.
Verlander. I would agree with that. And I think I said Scherzer was a number 2. So yeah, so maybe Verlander's a number 3. You've convinced me that he's not quite a number 2.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's kind of honestly, he's kind of Jordan Montgomery. Like that's kind of who Verlander is now.
Ooh, I like that. I kind of like that comparison. I don't think Montgomery's that bad though.
No, he's a good solid pitcher, but like if you said to somebody Justin Verlander is Jordan Montgomery, like that would trigger all sorts of alarms in their mind. And you go look at the numbers and you'd be like, oh, well, they're both low threes ERA. Montgomery's whip has been a little bit wonky this year, but he has a few more Ks. Like it's kind of same with those two.
Yeah.
And I think perspective and trade value wise, that would be different. That would be viewed differently.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think if someone was trading Justin Verlander, they'd be able to get more in a trade than Jordan Montgomery. And Jordan Montgomery is probably the same as Justin Verlander. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Let's go ahead and move over to Arizona, where they added Paul Sewald from Seattle. Seattle's getting Dominic Canzone, Josh Rojas, and Ryan Bliss. We don't really need to discuss any of those people. I don't think they're overly relevant for our game unless you're in, an AL only, and maybe Rojas has some value there, but he's already been picked up. It ends our Arizona, who is the closer, somebody tell me, discussion every week at least. Seattle is maybe the best park to pitch in, so that may be a little bit, but where are you at on Paul Sewald?
Well, after Sunday, and he gave up 3 runs, no recorded outs, and he blew the game. Maybe the Diamondbacks are still up in the air on saves. Yeah. No, I think Sewald's probably the closer. For full disclosure, I just actually traded for Sewald too. Or I am actually the Diamondbacks GM, who I don't know their name. I don't know who they are. The last Diamondbacks GM I know is Dave Stewart.
Corey Lavolo.
Oh, the manager's the GM?
Oh, sorry, they just pulled up. I typed in GM and it just gave me their manager. I'll tell you in a second.
Okay. So anyway, I just traded for Sewald in Tout Wars because I needed saves. I traded with Derek Carty, who needed, I guess he needed offense. I don't know. I traded him Max Muncy for Paul Sewald. So, that's basically what if you need saves, I think Sewald's in a great place. He's a solid pitcher. he didn't look great on Sunday. I think that's going to be fine. I think he'll be fine. Everyone blows a game occasionally. So yeah, I'm fine with Sewald. I think he's good, and he's probably safe for at least one or two more blow-ups until they look at Ginkle again. Hopefully that doesn't happen because, like I said, I just traded for him. But yeah, I think Sewald's okay.
And to be fair, his first game in Arizona with Arizona was perfectly fine. He had a clean outing, so yeah, I think he's fine. I think they traded for him. They're going to give him this opportunity because they really didn't like anybody in that role all season. Every time it got handed to somebody, it kind of went bad. Arizona's at least, it's not home run friendly. It used to be. It's no longer that way. So I think that maybe helps out with some of the blowups a little bit to mitigate leaving Seattle, just some extent there. Scott Barlow goes to San Diego. He's
Mike
losing his.
Mike Hazen.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Mike Hazen is the GM there. Scott Barlow is leaving Kansas City, so he's losing his closer job. He's going to San Diego. Hader is not going to give up his job to Scott Barlow. I can almost promise you that. But if we're looking in Kansas City, Austin Cox or Carlos Hernandez, do either of them interest you for saves? Are you picking up one or the other or both potentially?
Oh, he was the guy who lost his wife to cancer. Ah, it's super sad. So sad. Anyway, Mike Hazen, that is. I was looking at Mike Hazen's Wikipedia page. Okay, Scott Barlow, I think he's just become a middle reliever. And then in Kansas City, I would say Carlos Hernandez is like the one guy I would pick up. But will it be definitely Carlos Hernandez's job from now until the end of the year? I don't really. I can't say that, but it's also, I mean, the Royals are a sneaky, terrible team. So, they may only get 5 saves total from now until the end of the year. So, yeah, Carlos Hernandez, I guess, if you're desperate, but it's not a great situation.
Yeah, it's definitely not a great situation. They did give Austin Cox the first save. That was, I think, on Friday. Yeah, it was Friday that he got the save. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's kind of a bit of a mess. Austin Cox has not been particularly clean in his own work, so it's not as though, if he's not the closer, you're picking up good numbers. He's been a little erratic as well. So I think it's probably Carlos Hernandez. It seems like the most logical one. But just keep an eye out if they keep going to Austin Cox, then maybe they're just trying to get him ready for a future closer role as he is still young in that system. Tommy Pham goes to Arizona. Jeremy Rodriguez goes back to the Mets in that deal. Are we getting full-time playing time for Pham now? And where does that move him up into the outfielders for you?
No, I don't think that's going to be. I don't think he gets everyday playing time. I think he's probably still somewhat of a platoon player, and I don't think he's very good anymore. Like that's he did have like a year or two there where he was very valuable for fantasy, but in general, I don't know. I mean, he's fine, but he's not really like a mixed league 12 team guy that you can really rely on. I mean, if he's hitting, sure, great. That's fine. I think he gets a little bit boring with his stats now, as a for a fantasy guy at least, because it's like he's got 10 homers, 13 steals on the year. That's fine in like NL only, but in a mixed league, that kind of gets boring a little bit. At least in a 12-team mixed league or shallower, which is the majority of our listeners. So yeah, he's fine. I don't like. He's really kind of boring. Like not in reality, because he goes to strip clubs, gets stabbed, slaps Jock Peterson. I mean, in reality, he's not boring at all. He's actually he's crazy as shit. But for fantasy, he's he's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I maybe have a little bit higher opinion on his fantasy production than you, given full time. Just because there's been a number of times this year where he's been performing really well. And if he was playing every day, I think he would have been pretty much universally owned. And then just you start looking at the plate appearances he's getting, and you're like, oh, I can't start somebody that's getting 3 out of 6 games. But I feel like he's getting more starts since he's been traded. He's played the last 4 games, hitting either third or fifth. So he's hitting in the middle of the lineup. And he's going to give you a little bit of both. He's going to give you a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. His average isn't going to tank, or at least it generally doesn't absolutely tank. So I think there's a little bit more value here than maybe what you're looking at. But I agree that he's not a needle mover. He's not going to put up massive numbers rest of season.
What you're describing is a guy who's more valuable than most people think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's what I thought.
Yeah, which is usually a guy you have in like a 15-team mixed league or deeper, and you're happy with them. Whereas like in a 12-team mixed league, you grow kind of bored of that. you grow bored of the middle of the order, hits 1 homer every 10 days and steals a base every 10 days, and you're like, yeah, there's got to be someone else.
Fair enough. I think he can give you a little bit of both, but you're right. I mean, in a shallower league, it's probably going to get pretty boring unless he gets hot. Just something to throw out there, though. I mean, if you're looking at deep in outfield, I think you could do worse than him, especially with some of those guys at the back end not really performing very well in recent days. Jeimer Candelario.
Could you also go in and could you beep out all the times you disagree with me on this podcast as well?
So you just want me to just remove myself? The question and then just remove myself? Is that what you're wanting to hear?
No, we love Don's disagreements. No, don't you dare. Now don't be self-deprecating.
Just gonna white noise it. It's just gonna like wave. I'm just putting waves crashing on the beach during where I'm supposed to be talking, and then you'll just come in at disagreeing with waves.
You can actually put me. You know that famous shot of Ben Affleck looking real sad on the beach with the towel? Put my head on that body and just have me staring at the water talking.
That's pretty much what we're gonna do. I think I'm just gonna turn on a noise machine. I'm gonna pre-record my questions every 10 minutes. And then just that's going to be how the podcast is going from here on out.
Yeah, could you just cue me? Okay. Anyway, I'm feeling giddy today. Go ahead. Sorry, B-Don. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
Moving over to my potentially division-winning Chicago Cubs. They have added Jeimer Candelario, big, huge move for the Cubs. They sent DJ Hers and Kevin Made. DJ Hers sounds like the guy who was at Gray's bar mitzvah playing tunes. He does seem to be playing every day, Candelario, but he's hitting 6 through 8. I mean, if Tommy Pham was boring to you, then Candelario at the back end has to be, are you falling asleep?
DJ Hers, for DJ Hers' credit, not only did he DJ, but he also made balloon animals. So it's like,
And he rents cars.
and now he works at Enterprise. But then he was a DJ when he did my bar mitzvah. Okay. Okay. So Jeimer Candelario, I think he's actually great. I like Jeimer Candelario. I'll be honest. I didn't, last year I wrote a sleeper post for him, and man, he looked terrible. He looked awful, but he has a great launch angle, and in Wrigley, I think he could do some damage. Like, I really think Jeimer Candelario is kind of underrated, even in shallower leagues. I'm a fan. I think we're looking at a guy who could potentially say 25 homers, 10 steals, 275 average. Like, he needs to finish strong for that to happen. But that could be his end of the year numbers. That is good. That's good. I mean, I'm saying the obvious here, but 25, 10, 275 is really solid, especially for like where he was drafted. So yeah, I'm a fan of Jeimer Candelario. I think he probably is going to be underrated again next year too. I don't see him moving up draft boards. So, just brace yourself for Jeimer Candelario's sleeper 2024.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are solid. They're fine. I would say that like this year, if you're looking at player rater, his value was really kind of buoyed by the county numbers. Um, and with him moving over to Chicago, who has, I didn't think I'd say this. They actually have options, in their batting order right now. It like him being buried at the bottom is going to take away from what he's been providing in, for the Nationals, where he was hitting at the top of the lineup, because he's 57, 53 on the runs RBIs for them. Hitting in the bottom of the Cubs order, he's just not going to get the plate appearances and the runs and RBI, I think, in there. But I think in regards to the overall production, in regards to home runs, stolen bases, and what you're saying, yeah, I think it probably does go a little unrecognized that he's having a pretty solid season, and he's going to end up, in the low 20s of home runs and, probably 8, 9, 10 steals, somewhere in that area. And that is a pretty solid player in most leagues. Again, in a shallow league with him dropping in the order, it may not be as interesting, but he also has multi-position eligibility, and that's always nice in shallow leagues, because then you kind of move him around when other guys have days off too, without having to go to the wire.
Yeah, that's fair.
Moving on to some maybe lesser trades here. Paul Dejong goes to Toronto. Matt Svanson goes back to St. Louis in that deal. Bo Bichette, Rutro Bichette goes over to the IL, but it doesn't sound like it's a big issue. I guess in correlation with this, they've also called up Davis Schneider, who is getting time at third base. DeYoung's playing shortstop or second base. Actually, I think Davis is playing second base. Sorry about that. Are you interested in DeYoung? And I'll go ahead and bring in Davis Schneider here, who has had a pretty successful year in AAA, going 21 home runs, 9 stolen bases, 275, 416, 553.
I think Davis is at second, and Whit Merrifield now is. I think Davis Schneider's at second, and Whit Merrifield's in the outfield still, even though I see Roster Resource has it the opposite way or something. Anyway, that's irrelevant. Davis Schneider. I don't know, maybe because sometimes these guys are like, written off as like not real prospects early on in their minor league career, but he looked like he really came around in AAA this year. Like, I don't know. I mean, I get it. At no point was he a prospect that anyone was interested in, like in, prior to 2023. But unless he's just finally, seeing the pitchers in AAA for so much, because he's been there for now, he was there in 2022 as well. So maybe he's just seen the pitchers so much in AAA. I don't know. He looks like he was breaking out though in AAA. Like, and he's only 24. It's not like he's a 28-year-old and has been in AAA for like 3 years. He's not like Kenny Powers. Like, he's just gotten to AAA kind of, and he's 24. I don't know. I mean, I was kind of surprised to see him sort of come up without any fanfare whatsoever, and everyone just sort of, I think people just wrote him off. But he looks good. If Bichette comes back this Friday, as they're saying, the lineup does get a little bit squeezed, so he may lose a little bit of playing time. And Paul Dejong, the reason why we're even discussing the Jays right now, with Paul Dejong getting traded there, again, when Bichette comes back on Friday, I think Dejong probably falls into somewhat of a platoon of some sort, and he's also, Dejong isn't very good. So,
No.
I mean, he hits the occasion, he hits like the occasional homer. He doesn't make great contact, so he's not going to hit for a good average. And he's fine for like deeper leagues in like mostly for daily leagues too once he starts platooning. So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in Davis Schneider more than Dejong, to be honest. But we'll see what happens with Schneider's playing time once Bichette comes back. But for right now, because Schneider's hitting so well and he's seeing the ball so well, I would pick up Schneider in just about any league if you have, the room for him.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Santiago Espinal or Kevin Biggio get optioned if Davis Schneider continues to hit. I think DeJong is just, he's going to be a depth piece. He can kind of play all over. And if DeJong is in that class of guys who, if your only really great season was 2019, I don't believe you. Like you aren't that good.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, didn't the Biggio, Espinal, they had a bunch of guys that had huge 2019 teams years, right?
Yeah, I think 2019 was a very good year for Toronto and
Oh,
everybody.
Wait, they had the bouncy ball and they were in the minor league park, right?
No, 2020 I thought was the minor
20,
league
oh
park.
no, 20, you're right. Yeah, 2020 and 2021 they were in a minor league park. Yeah, my bad. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But yes, that's how bouncy the ball was. Like Paul Dejong was a legitimate like fantasy stud for that season. That's how crazy that ball was. Moving on, Aaron Civale is going to Tampa Bay for much needed pitching reinforcement. And they're actually giving up a very good prospect in Kyle Manzardo going back to Cleveland for this. Civale is a cost controlled young pitcher who's good. And just kind of thinking about this, like, can you imagine if Tampa Bay's pitchers could stay healthy, how good they would be this year, Gray?
Yeah. Okay, so my thoughts on that is the Rays don't pay anyone. Well, they did actually pay Eflin a little bit, but barely. They don't pay anyone. So if they like ruin their arms, they're kind of like they shrug and they're like, we'll just create another great starter. So really, it happens. I think that's sort of the Rays perception on this whole thing. I kind of understand getting Civale for Manzardo, even though I think Manzardo could be good, like you said. Controllable young starters who are already good, that's valuable. So yeah, I think the Rays. I think Civale, is he a 2.50 ERA pitcher? No, obviously he's not. But he could be a 3.50 pitcher. He's kind of like, a Marcus Stroman or something. Like, not incredible Ks, good command, manages to induce weak contact from hitters. So yeah, he's one of those guys who will exceed like his xFIP. Like he's gonna look better than his peripherals. But this better? I don't know about that. But yeah, he's a startable guy though. Like in just about every mixed league. With for ratios, if not, maybe. If he can get the Ks back from last year, then he becomes a whole lot more interesting. But right now, his Ks are, pretty bad.
Yeah, the Ks being under 20% makes him, you can run him out there for the ratios, and that's fine. I've been doing that in some leagues. It's really hard to find guys you can count on for good ratios consistently this year. But yeah, the Ks just really aren't there. So at some extent, you're eating up innings, especially if you have an innings cap without the opportunity to really get a lot of strikeouts. I think the biggest thing he's done this year is just really, really limit the home run. And I don't really have anything that I can contribute in regards to what has caused this significant drop in his home runs. Like he hasn't really picked up velocity. There's not really been a pitch mix change or a drop in like the break or change in the break. Really, it just seems like he's kind of had the year where the home run, the fly ball has been very depressed, and he's just kind of keeping the ball in play. And so, as long as he's doing that, I'm all for him. I do wonder about that home run, the fly ball as we kind of enter, next season and where he might be ranked.
I think I kind of trust the Rays. He's not the kind of pitcher I usually draft anyway, but if he's going at a decent draft spot, I could see potentially maybe like if he's at like 200 overall, yeah, 175, yeah, maybe. If he's above 150, then it starts to get a little iffy because you're really just making a ratio play. But anyway.
Yeah, maybe they can teach him the curveball or the changeup that they teach to everybody, and then he'll be a better pitcher. But until the K's come up, he is kind of what he is. And like you said, I think it's more 3.5, maybe even like 3.8 if I'm being realistic in regards to where I'd probably have him at rest of season. But the Rays are a very good organization, and he's been pitching very well all year. Speaking of somebody who has been pitching well, Michael Lorenzen is on the move. He's going from Detroit to the Phillies. Hao-Yu Lee is going back in the trade to Detroit. The second half this year, Michael Lorenzen has been great. He has 26 and 2/3 innings. He has a 1.69 ERA, an 0.90 WHIP, and a 22% K rate. He has gotten rid of the cutter and the curve, barely throwing the sinker, so he's just simplified down the pitch mix, and the results have been good so far, Greg.
Yeah, no, completely. My big concern with him is I think the Phillies have talked about, or was it the Phillies or just general consensus? I think someone said it, and it makes sense that he could be limited and moved to the bullpen fairly soon because his innings are getting up there. Like he can probably only throw like 35 to 40 more innings. So, 5 to 7 more starts, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I guess most people are only going to throw 10 more starts. So, maybe that's not bad. But yeah, I mean, he's getting up there with innings. So I don't know. I could see the Phillies potentially moving him to the pen because it's like either get, 5 to 6 more starts or get like the rest of the year with a solid long reliever. So, that's just something to watch because the Phillies do have 6 men in their rotation right now.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think Christopher Sanchez really stays in the rotation. I think that's the piece that moves to the bullpen, or maybe they send him down to the minors if they want him to continue throwing starters innings. Michael Lorenzen, I mean, they traded for Lorenzen. He's on the last year of his contract, so they really don't have any incentive not to blow his arm out and let him throw innings upon innings the rest of the season. Because I was thinking the opposite way of what you're saying and what's I guess you've heard reported. I assume they were grabbing him just to load him up on innings and maybe save Wheeler, Nola, Walker, and Suarez, the guys they have under contract for next year, and just let Lorenzen be the innings guy. I mean, he's a 31, 32-year-old pitcher. He's going to be a free agent. I just don't see them being like, oh, well, we had to preserve this guy's arm who's not going to be back with us.
I just quickly did a search. I see the Phillies reporter said that they're a 6-man rotation right now, but they have to move someone to the bullpen soon. So
do they really?
I don't know. That's honestly, you're right. I can't argue with that. I mean, why limit a guy who you're not going to have around? I mean, it sucks, it sucks to say that from a labor standpoint because just like who cares about Lorenzen and his arm? But you're right. I mean, the Phillies could throw him for the rest of the year potentially. It's hard to say.
Yeah, that sounds like one of those news bits from a less than maybe reputable Philly source, but who knows? Moving on, let's talk about Jack Flaherty. He goes to Baltimore. Seattle or St. Louis is getting Cesar Prieto, Dream Rome, and Zach Showalter back. I will say the velocity has been ticking back up slightly for Flaherty, so there's a little bit of hope here. Where are you at on Jack Flaherty? Who, I mean, he was okay. He's had a strong little second half start here. Where are you at on him?
Also, I think I forget which start it was, but there was one of those starts from Flaherty where it's like he gave up so many earned runs, and if you throw out that one start, His ratios look better. Like everything looks better. He still is having some issues with his command, though, I believe. So unless the Orioles can fix that, but you're right, the velocity is up. So yeah, I'm in on Flaherty if he's able to. Baltimore's a great park. I think he's got. I think he's potentially could be a good, every start guy for the rest of the year. I would keep starting him until like he, said otherwise with his pitching. I have no problem with Jack Flaherty at this point. I was really kind of out on him when he was with St. Louis, and I felt like he was just a little bit too wild. But right now I don't mind him. I'm kind of in on Jack Flaherty on the Orioles.
Yeah, and another guy who has, he's coming up on an unrestricted free agency. So another guy that you assume is going to have the innings, and he's somebody who needs to show that he can still pitch because he's going to be looking for that next contract. He's only 27, so I mean, in some ways, he's very lucky to have gotten called up when he did prior to the injuries, because he kept his arbitration clock ticking to some extent. So that was very nice for him. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that he's, a solid option for them as he's coming down the stretch. The velocity ticking up makes me feel better about, where his arm is at in regards to health and what's going on. So I think he's a fine streamer here, and the home run should be helped out by moving to Baltimore.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Josh Bell is going to Miami. Gene Segura, Khalil Watson go back to Cleveland in that deal. They immediately cut Gene Segura, so nothing to talk about there. I almost feel like there's nothing to talk about Josh Bell. He's going to a almost same park factor, but one that's so much worse for home runs that he's. Ugh.
Yeah, he is. Ugh.
Okay,
he's very ugh.
Yeah, let's just move on then. Ryan Yarbrough goes to the Dodgers. Devin Mann and Derlin Figueroa go to Kansas City. The second half this year, Ryan Yarbrough has a 2.35 ERA, a 1.00 WHIP, and a 14% K rate. He's never been a strikeout guy, and he's starting with an opener, but he's giving some pretty solid ratios this second half, and really most of the season, Greg.
Yeah, and also the Dodgers cheat, so how bad could he be? I mean, the Dodgers have made Ahmad Rosario a cleanup hitter. Is that? I mean, I think at a certain point, like if you're cheating so much where you're making a guy with 3 homer power into a cleanup hitter, then you're cheating too much. You're making it too obvious. Like it's like, oh, I don't think the Dodgers cheat, and then you see Rosario cleanup, and you're like, okay, hold up a second, that's cheating. Yeah, I think Yarbrough is fine in like NL only, where you could get potentially some good ratios, and like actually in one NL only league, I think I picked him up because he was. He was super cheap for Fab, and I needed, I just need an arm, and that's all Yarbrough really is, and it's for NL only, so NL only, so yeah, it's like, it's fine.
Yeah, I will say I've always kind of been a fan of Ryan Yarbrough. I think he's a good pitcher. Like he's just a really solid pitcher most of the time when he's healthy. The times that he's not looked good, I feel like he's been battling injuries. So I always like him. I think he's a fine streamer even in shallower leagues. Even without starting, he's got wins in 2 of his last 3 starts, and he's going at least 5 innings, 6 innings in most of them as well. So you're getting the innings out of him that you would out of a starter anyway. So I think there's a place for him as a streamer, even in like 12-team leagues potentially. But again, it depends on where you're at against that innings cap limit. There's a bunch of other minimal deals here, Gray. I'm just going to run through them. You tell me if there's anything after I get through this list that you want to kind of circle back to and talk about. Garrett Cooper and Sean Reynolds go to San Diego for Ryan Weathers, and he goes back to the Marlins. Mark Canha goes to the Brewers for Justin Jarvis back to the Mets. AJ Pollock and Mark Matthias go to San Francisco. Luis Urias goes to Boston. Andrew Chafin goes to Milwaukee. Jake Berger goes to Miami. Cole Calhoun to Cleveland. Jace Peterson to Arizona, Rich Hill and Ji-Man Choi to San Diego, and Luis Patino to the White Sox. There were some other deals that I didn't quite mention.
I almost feel like Jake Berger was in there as like, which guy is unlike the other guys? It's a little bit unfair to put Jake Berger in with like AJ Pollock.
Is it?
Jake Berger's not that bad. Come on. I mean, he's got 26 homers? I mean,
Yeah.
he's on pace for like 35 homers this year. And I don't know. I mean, the average isn't good, but he makes no contact. What I mean, is he that much worse than Kyle Schwarber?
The new Max Muncy?
Yeah, or Max Muncy? I mean, Schwarber especially. Schwarber's just been so bad. And Muncy hasn't been good either. I will say, back to the Muncy Sewald trade that I mentioned earlier, that is an on-base percentage league, so Muncy's a little bit better there. Yeah, Berger I think is okay. I mean, he's fine for power. I would have gone and tried to get him in like an NL only league where he came into the league from the White Sox. I think, in a mixed league, yeah, I mean, okay, he's probably more of like a utility guy in a 12-team mixed league. So, yeah. But AJ Pollock is like, he's unstartable. And Berger's better than that. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I have nothing else to say about those guys.
Fair enough. I just, if AJ Pollock falls into an everyday role, the Giants are very old. Like, I don't know what the Giants are going to do with him. Like, I don't even know why they were trading for him. So that's where, he gets thrown in there. But yes, I generally would agree.
AJ Pollock feels like a trade you make when it's like, well, we have to say to our fans we're trying something. Because otherwise we're doing nothing at the trade deadline. So let's do something. Well, we can't do anything that's really going to be anything. So let's do AJ Pollock. AJ Pollock move.
It's like I'm surprised it wasn't a Cubs move, honestly. It feels like a Cubs move this year. But
and you know what it feels like? It feels like a recent Yankees move. Keenan Middleton. Oh, okay. What is that? What's that doing for us?
I'm surprised they didn't go back to the Dodgers because they love bringing back crappy old players who do nothing for them nowadays. Yeah, that would have been another good fit.
Honestly, I think Ryan Yarbrough is better than Keenan Middleton for like if the Yankees needed a starter more than they needed just a random middle reliever. Not that Middleton's awful, but I mean, kind of not great.
Kind of not. Kind of actually not really good. He's like 38 years old now, and it's not great, Gray.
Yeah, it's not. He's
great. Like 30. I'm just giving him shit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on past the. Okay. Sorry, I put Jake Berger in that useless class of trades. Jake Berger, I apologize. Next year, when you hit 20 home runs and 164, it'll be whatever. Next is the return of the injured pitcher. Had a bunch of guys come back from pretty long absences. Brandon Woodruff, I think, being the top of the class. It's a guy we definitely liked in the preseason, and then I'm sure all of our teams didn't like that he was no longer available on them. Velocity was down a little bit on his first outing versus Pittsburgh, but he went 5 innings, gave up 2 earned on 2 home runs, 9 strikeouts, 0 walks. Where are you at on Brandon Woodruff? And maybe, I guess, we're going to talk about a few other guys returning from injury. How do you handle pitchers coming back from a long injury absence?
I had one of those years where I had like Woodruff, Max Fried, Jazz Chisholm, O'Neal Cruz was like 4 of my top 6 rounds.
Lance Lynn and Alec Manoah.
Yeah, Lance and Alec Manoah. Yeah, I had one of those years, man. I am doing really bad in a lot of my leagues, like worse than I've done in a while. Anyway, Woodruff, if he's healthy, I think he's a number. He's a number 1 if he's healthy. His, like you said, velocity's down a little bit, so that's a little bit of a concern. I don't think he's completely healthy, but knock on wood, I wouldn't trade for him if I didn't have him. But if you have him, knock on wood.
All right. So that's what I was going to ask is, where he's sitting, would you make a deal for him and potentially look to add him, or is it strictly if you have him, you're throwing him, but I'm not going out for on a limb to grab him. So it sounds like you're more in the secondary camp. Talking about some of the guys we were talking about earlier, would you rather have Jordan Montgomery or Brandon Woodruff rest of the season?
Oh, I'd probably go Woodruff.
Yeah, just for the upside play there.
Yeah.
How about your boy?
Especially, I'm pot committed at this point,
Yeah.
So
How about your boy Jose Barrios?
I would go Woodruff over Barrios for sure. Yeah, that's
All
not
right.
even close. I would say Woodruff or Glasnow. I would go Glasnow, but I think that's probably closer than Barrios.
Barrios has been pretty dang good this year, Gray. And not
but
that I want to give him the credit.
I hate him though. So it doesn't matter. He can be pitching well.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Nestor Cortes. He's also returning. His first outing versus Houston. He went 4 innings, 1 hit, 1 home run, 1 earned run, 1 walk, and 8 Ks, which was very nice to see from him, especially against a team in Houston that doesn't tend to strike out all that much. Where are you at on Nestor? Is he kind of jumping back in where he normally fits in, or is this another kind of you're writing it out if you have him, but that's about where we're at?
Yeah. He actually, to me, he looked better than Woodruff, but he was on a lower, he was on a shorter pitch count. So, right? I think, yeah. So, yeah, he looked good. I don't fully trust him because of the injury, but yeah, I think he looked fine. I think he looked probably the best out of, him or Woodruff. I think he looked even better, but yeah, I think Woodruff obviously has a higher upside than Cortes.
All right, so you're still taking Woodruff over Cortes, right?
Yeah,
even though they were, despite what they looked like.
I think so.
You brought up Aaron Nola. Would you go Aaron Nola or Nestor Cortes?
Oh, I go Nola for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to gauge where you have everybody. Max Fried, another one who's coming back. The Braves have been trying to fill their pitching rotation all year, and maybe he can help them. Yeah, at the Cubs, he had 6 innings, 3 hits, 0 earned, 0 walks, 8 Ks. By the way, at the Cubs, not just a sleepwalk anymore. They are actually leading the league in runs in the second half. Velocity looks good. If anything, it's maybe up slightly from where he was at the beginning of the season or end of last season. I feel like you and Max Fried have always sat on a little bit of a fragile line here. Where are you at on Fried as like the one Atlanta pitcher you might have trusted other than Strider coming in the season?
I drafted Fried in a bunch of places, like I said. I'm hoping Fried's good. I have real concerns about it because he was out for a while, but like you said, the velocity looked good. So yeah, maybe he's fine. I would be shocked, honestly, if he's fine health wise, because what he had isn't something most guys just come back from. He seemed like he was headed for serious surgery. So I don't know. Hopefully he's fine though. I like I said, I have him on team, so I want him to be fine. I think he's got the most risk out of these 3 pitchers, but also he easily looked the best out of all 3 of them too. Like he looked better than Woodruff and Cortes. So I would say Fried over all of them, and just hope he's healthy because that's the only thing stopping him.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. And all of these guys, when you miss this much time, you're always worried they're going to re-injure something. So when it comes to re-injury, I don't know that I necessarily have him as less of a risk, but like all of them have that risk. And like you said, he looked the best of the group. Jose Urquidy is the next one. I think this is maybe the last of the injured guys we're going to talk about real quick. He looked the worst of the group, going 3 1/3. Gave up 5 earned, 1 home run, 3 walks, 1 strikeout at the Yankees. So also kind of the toughest matchup potentially, at least ballpark wise. Again, the Cubs have led baseball and runs in the second half. I'm just going to say that as much as I can while it's true as a Cubs fan. I mean, Urquidy may be one just to avoid, Gray. I'm a little worried about him.
Yeah, I wouldn't go near Urquidy. I don't even think he's that good, even if he's healthy. Like, he's just not that good, I don't think. Like, at least for fantasy. He's an innings eater usually. So, yeah, I wouldn't mess with him. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a high 3s ERA with like right at the line of strikeouts where you're maybe okay with it. So yeah, not a whole lot there. I think the circle is back around to guys we've talked about before. I think he's basically what I would predict for Aaron Civale next year, which is like a 3.8 ERA with like a 21% K rate. And
I think if anything, I think Civale is better ratio wise and just better in general. And as shown, like, he can have better Ks. Urquidy doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Moving on, Oswaldo Cabrera was recalled as Anthony Rizzo was sent to the IL. Oswaldo Cabrera has been back and forth. Is this finally the time he gets playing time, or are we just ignoring and waiting until he gets traded or finally gets some playing time magically?
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees are just such a mess. They're just being run. They're being run so terribly. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think Cabrera has playing time.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I
Yeah, I
don't know
just
where he
don't
fits
think it's
in.
there. I mean, they're looking at Oswaldo Cabrera, like Rizzo, like you said. Rizzo goes at IL. Jake Bauers becomes an everyday guy. Like, why? Why? I mean, I know he's hitting right now. Currently, he is hot, but him? That's who you're like. You have all these prospects that aren't like, you have Peraza, you have Oswaldo and Oswald, and instead you're like, oh, let's see what Jake Bauers can do for us. Like, what? I don't know, man. The Yankees are absolute mess. That's all I can say. Anyway, moving along.
Yeah, the outfield's a little weird, and it's all a little bit weird right now in New York. Matt Wallner, he's just hitting everything. There really wasn't anything to say other than just like I feel like we had to mention him because he's come out of nowhere to just light the world on fire. Gray, what's going on here?
Yeah, and he's hitting in the middle of the Twins order right now, and the Twins really don't have much for in the way of, like, a middle of the order bat. So Matt Wallner looks good. Like, he looks like he has big time power. I don't know if the average is going to be able to stay. Like, right now it's at around 270. He looks more like a 225 hitter at best. So, the average could definitely bottom out, but he has big time power. So yeah, I'm adding Wallner everywhere as of right now. Like, to me, he feels he reminds me of Joey Menez last year. Like, sometimes these guys come up, like a Wallner comes up and he has big time power, and the pitchers don't really know what to do with them. So, and by the way, Wallner has more power than Joey Menez. But, with that said, Wallner comes up and the pitchers don't know really how to get him out yet. So they just pitch to him, like, they just try and overpower him, and he hits a home run, like, because he can hit fastballs. So eventually pitchers are going to be like, oh, he can't hit sliders, or he can't hit changes, or whatever he can't hit. I don't know what he can't hit, but something. There'll be something he can't hit, because they figured it out in the minor leagues. Like, there was times in the minor leagues when he looked like a 220 hitter. So I think he comes back to that. But right now he's hitting everything. So I would definitely grab him in every league.
All right. Estuary Ruiz was recalled from his rehab assignment, second in stolen bases in the league right now. I mean, maybe this is the guy who Tim Anderson should have picked a fight on. Another single home run guy.
That would be hilarious. Like I said earlier, like the feather fighting the marshmallow. Oh man, yeah, he should have. You're right, Tim Anderson. Yeah, I mean everyone knows Ruiz. He's got crazy speed, so yeah, I would activate him. I would assume no one dropped Ruiz when he was injured. I would activate him. Sure.
All right. Slade Sassone was recalled. The numbers this year in AAA for the Diamondbacks look really bad. Uh, he's got a 6.38 ERA, a 1.38 WHIP. I will say he is in Reno in the PCL, so you combine those things and you kind of understand where maybe that comes from. But he's being given an opportunity up in the majors for the Diamondbacks. I don't know that he necessarily sticks in the rotation, but he's up there for now. Are you interested in Sassone and anything outside of NL only, Gray?
No.
Okay. Three other real minor moves. I'm just going to say them again. Tell me if you want to discuss them at all. Jake Fraley goes to the IL. TJ Hopkins is called up by Cincinnati. He was hitting 16 home runs, one stolen base, 318, 425, 541 down in the minors. Jeter Downs was called up. He had 36 games in AAA, 3 home runs, 8 stolen bases. He was hitting 175, 301, 333. Not really a line to report home about, but at one point he was considered a top prospect in the game. And then Weston Wilson was called up as well, 28 years old. AAA this year in 100 games, he had 25 home runs, 23 stolen bases, 67, 69, 260, 361, and 524. He is 28, so he's been down in AAA for a while, but he's never put up a line like that one.
Yeah, but he is a quad A player. I think. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's hot. Like I was saying with Joey Menez, maybe Wilson comes up and is hot for like a month, but I don't even think he has playing time, to be honest. I think he was just, a backup. Like, I think, if anything, I think Ruiz, Rojas, excuse me, Johan Rojas, I think, takes over Marsh got injured, so the Phillies called up Wilson, I think, to back up Rojas. I think that's how that's going to play. And Rojas is interesting for speed, but Wilson is not even like, I don't think his playing time's there. Anyway, Jeter Downs, man, what happened to him? What happened? What happened to him, bro? Right? I mean, he was hitting like Jeter Downs is hitting 175 in AAA. What? How do you hit 175 in AAA? Unfortunately, I think Jeter Downs is going to be like, I think he's going to be out of baseball in a couple of years. I don't know. He's got to really figure it out. I don't know why he was even called up, to be honest. I guess, they had an injury, so they were like, well, let's call up Jeter. And then they held their hand over their mouth so people would think they were calling up Derek Jeter. Let's call up the 48-year-old Jeter. Wait.
Doesn't he own another team? Can we do that?
Can we call up a guy who isn't even in our farm system? Is that fair? Is that allowed? Yeah, Jeter Downs has been really bad in AAA, so I had nothing to see there until like maybe if he gets hot. I don't know.
Yeah, and it doesn't. Hitting 175 in AAA does not inspire confidence that he's going to get hot all of a sudden. We were talking about a guy who had like power speed combo and like he was going to be great, and this is maybe the argument point for avoid guys who get traded a bunch as a prospect because he moved 3 or 4 different times between teams and different trades,
or you could make him your leadoff man and first baseman if you're the Yankees. Jake Bauers has been traded 7 times. He must be good.
Everybody wants him.
Everyone wants him, right?
All right, great. Let's go ahead and go through some waivers here.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Jake Bauers. He has been hot. Jake Bauers, man. This is the Jake Bauers show. Okay, so Anyway, I was saying, let's see. Louis Rengifo, he's been hot. J.P. Crawford has been hot. Sticking with the Mariners. Cade Marlowe's been hot. I mentioned earlier that whatchamacallit, Marsh is injured. So Rojas is Rojas potentially could really be in every league. He could potentially be a really good pickup. I mean, we'll see. But he has speed. If you need steals, like he could be like Estuary Ruiz for a couple weeks. Okay. Speaking of a guy who has speed, Blanco on the Royals, Joey Menez, who I've mentioned about 5 or 6 times this podcast. He's been hot. Let's see who else. Gary Sanchez has been hot. TJ Friedel has been hot. Mike Tuckman, Joey Votto, Matt Wallner, who we mentioned earlier, who I think should be owned in every league. Bryce Terang, Ryan Mountcastle, Freddie Furman has been hot. A dollar store Freddie Freeman, Ian Happ, and Jake Cronenworth. And have I mentioned Jake Bowers? That's about it.
Yeah, before we get into the pitchers, I realized we skipped over the bullpen section. Jordan Hicks, Eric Swanson actually seemed to be kind of in a committee in Toronto, Gray, until we get Romano back. Are you willing to roster both of them and just see if you can get some saves out of them?
No.
No?
I would say probably I would just go with one of them and hope you get the saves. If anything, I'd say Jordan Hicks. We mentioned earlier in the Royal situation, I would probably go with Carlos Hernandez, but not really expect anything. And then the Phillies, Kimbrel was tipping his pitches, so they went with Dominguez. I would also look at Soto potentially. And then after Sewald was moved to the Diamondbacks, Munez looks actually like a solid pickup. The Mariners' new closer. So yeah.
Yeah, Andres Munoz is probably the closer pickup of the week if he's not already owned in your leagues. We'll see what happens with Kimbrel and whether he can get back into the 9th inning and stop tipping his pitches. I think it's been an issue for him before, so maybe it's something that he's reverted back to that he needs to kind of clean up. Hopefully, because I have Kimbrel all over the place. In regards to waivers, jumping back there's a number of catchers who have actually been performing well. So if you've been kind of writing it out and you're with whoever and your catchers have been awful, Cal Raleigh's been hitting well, Andrew Kisner, Gary Sanchez, I think, has like 6 home runs in the last 2 weeks. Mitch Garver has gotten catcher eligibility, and he's hitting and playing pretty regularly. Tom Murphy is not playing regularly, but he's hitting when he does. And Alejandro Kirk, who we've been waiting all year to finally hit, has finally hit after we destroyed him on a show like 3 weeks ago and said he wasn't hitting. He has turned it on. On the pitcher side, Michael Lorenzen versus Washington. We already talked about how good he's been. Brady Singer at Boston. He's been a little bit inconsistent this year, but he's riding, I think, a streak of 3 quality starts in a row. Ryan Yarbrough versus Colorado. I don't know if he's starting that game or going with an opener. Paul Blackburn has started to turn it around again as well, and he's going at Washington. Adrian Hauser has been up and down, but he gets home Colorado, who's been pretty much a mess. And then Brandon Pfaadt, not great matchups, but he's started to look a little bit better in his last couple outings. He gets the Dodgers and San Diego. Again, not ideal, but he is a 2-start guy. So if you're chasing strikeouts this week, he could do worse, I think, than running him out there. Anything else to say, Gray?
No.
Nope. All right,
I know. Jake Bowers.
Well, go grab Jake Bowers for Gray. Let him start at the top of your lineup like the Yankees do. And if you have specific questions, come find us. I'm on Twitter at RazBeaton. Gray is the owner of the Razball account. Like, subscribe, rate, review, wherever you get your podcast. You want to watch us talk to each other, you can go to youtube.com/RazballFantasy. Same thing there in regards to rate, review. Leave your comments. We'll get back to you. And until next week, Gray, talk to you later.
Late.